Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on Microsoft Viva, Copilot, and communications and employee connection. We're really excited to share a ton of information and insights with you guys today. I'm Richard Harbridge. I'm Chief Technology Officer at TutorLead, and I'm joined by James and Jamie. Maybe you guys could introduce yourselves to the audience.
Yeah, of
Go ahead, Jamie.
course. Thanks. Hi, folks. I'm Jamie. I'm a Microsoft technical specialist aligned to what we call the modern workplace. So happy to be here with you today. I cover really everything Microsoft 365, Viva Employee Experience, and now Copilot for the modern workplace. So I'm excited to get into today's session. James?
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everybody. My name is James Wood. I'm also a modern work technical specialist here at Microsoft, covering our modern work solution area. So definitely excited to be here, talk to you guys today about Viva and Copilot, as well as the rest of the sessions coming up the rest of the week. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. And I know one of the first questions we'll probably get is, where are the slides? So we will make sure we share the slides in a follow-up email along with the recording, and we'll try our best to split up the Q&A if there is a bunch at the end of it. And so we'll make sure we follow up with that. And just as a bit of a teaser, this is one of 4 sessions, so there will be some links to the other ones at the end. But if you are curious, there are 3 other sessions that go into each of the other Viva or employee experience workload areas and talk about the Copilot experiences there. All right. With that, let's dive right in. Starting with this broad discussion of understanding AI, Viva, and Copilots, there's a lot to understand. Most of us have been dealing with the fact that AI is an exponential change. It's not linear, it's not an incremental change. It's a really significant one. And as organizations and even as individuals, it can be really challenging to adapt to that. One of the things that we often talk about with executives is this idea of, it's way too important to leave in the hands of technologists. And so it can be really tempting with these types of changes to say, oh, well, it's IT's responsibility to uplift us, or, hey, when that capability is built into the, product X that I'm going to use, I'll start to address it then. But because AI is driving such a significant productivity increase from 60% productivity gain on average to 120% productivity gain, depending on which workloads we're talking about, and 20% quality gain to 32% quality gain, we're seeing really substantial increases in impact. And these things are pretty easy to implement and start to get working with. So being at a disadvantage where you're not producing, at 60% plus productivity is something that we can't really ignore. And so again, some things we can defer. This is one of those ones we have to embrace. And we've been through major changes like this in the past. As an example, when we think of communications, we've had big changes that have transformed the entire way our organizations communicate and work with customers, the way we work with each other. Big changes like the PC era, or more recently the internet era, those happened over decades. And so those changes were big, but we had a lot of time to process, to rationalize, to test, to experiment and learn. Unfortunately, the pace of the change with AI is much, much more accelerated. So instead of having decades to work on, these capabilities are available now in our organizations today, and often very, very accessible. And so that means that we need to start learning these tools right now and addressing how they change not just how we communicate, but how we connect and engage with one another. One of the big things that we're seeing with these tools is it provides access to skills that you may not have had otherwise. Let me use an example. If you use something like ChatGPT or Copilot, you can actually write more effectively than you could without it. In essence, you're getting access to literary science and other types of knowledge and academic experiences that you might not have. This means that you're uplifting your skills, but it also potentially means that some other skills might be devalued, and it's important to understand where to focus your time and energy. Similarly, there are technical skills that we have. I know James and Jamie, in our experience building this deck, where it feels like there was a new announcement every day and we were adapting it. We did a lot of high velocity, collaboration. And in that time, we were showing off our PowerPoint skills, but not everyone has PowerPoint skills. So having tools like Copilot for Microsoft 365, where I can use it to build and craft more effective PowerPoint presentations, means that I can inherit, thousands of commands and understanding in PowerPoint through the access of a tool like an agent, like a Copilot. So again, the idea here is that it gives you skills that you might not have had before. It makes them much more accessible, and so that changes the nature of communication because there's many things that are skill dependent today. And lastly, there is an opportunity here where greater personalization is made possible because we can do both multi-channel communication much more effectively, which we'll talk a lot about today. But also longer tail, I'm kind of suggesting what we'll see more of over time is the ability to hyper personalize or contextualize communication, so it's the right time in the right way for that person. And that's a big deal for, I think, a lot of organizations. So lots to talk about for AI, but I'll pause there and pass it over to Jamie, because I know you've got some really interesting insights from Microsoft.
Yeah. I think this has really been a fantastic time. And when we start talking about generative AI, it's starting to, I think, be available to the general public now more than it ever has. I think the term AI has sort of been like off in the realm out there, but in terms of its accessibility, now it's kind of like people are asking for it, not just in business, but your, employees are coming to you and saying, hey, how can we start using these tools? Because I'm using them personally. So now it's about kind of sort of providing those tools at the forefront and making sure that you're not only giving them the benefit at the employee level, but also we'll talk about how that impacts you in terms of coordinating in your organization, leveraging generative AI, the actual tools in terms of managing your org and empowering them. But I like to talk a little bit about how generative AI is affecting the public with real numbers, right? So I love to flash up this slide. I think it sort of depicts the shocking reality of how much generative AI has impacted our world today, just showing some of those key pivotal points in sort of technology's growth, from things like the introduction of the mobile phone, and how long it essentially took to get to that 100 million users, right, or adoption. And looking at key things like the internet took 7 years, Facebook 4.5, right, and that just gets shorter and shorter. But even our own team here, being in the industry and talking to folks every day, and my job being about AI, even we all kind of stop and pause and look at that ChatGPT took only 3 months to reach 100 million users. That's shocking, even for us. Like I said, it kind of never fails. I bring up this slide and I start smiling just out of excitement and kind of can't wait to see where things are going to go, right? But now we talk a little bit about what that means for Microsoft, right? And so when we look at our sort of approach to leveraging these tools, that's where we start talking about Copilot. And so I love to flash up this slide because obviously today our session is focused around, Viva and around the different modules that are within the Viva suite, but also particularly how Copilot is integrating into that experience, right? How we are giving you that, employee-focused platform, employee experience platform, and how Copilot is integrating. But before we dive into that specifically, I just love to flash this up, and it gives you an idea of exactly how Microsoft is bringing generative AI to our different tools, both in that sort of plug-and-play situation where you are buying the Copilots out of the box, right? You license it to your users, it taps right into all of your data and resources, and they can start integrating the Copilot will integrate right into their everyday applications where they're actually leveraging it right away. Versus also providing you what we would call the Copilot stack, right? Which is what we build all these Copilots off of, and also provide you that as somewhat of a tool set to start to build your own Copilots, right? So you'll see in the top corner there of the slide, or the top section, things like Modern Workplace, right? So familiar items like Copilot for Microsoft 365 showing up in your Office suite, or a little bit lower, we see things like integration into the Power Platform, right? So having Copilots to help you build automation flows or work in your CRMs. And then, of course, at the very bottom, just a quick highlight, and then we're going to get into what we're going to focus on today. The last highlight is really what I mentioned around that Copilot stack as well, but in terms of giving you the tools to build your own, that's another really important piece. So we're giving you exactly the same, tools and model building capabilities that, again, we're using to build these front-end tools for you today in our front-end Copilots right in your hands. So this should give you a little bit of a better idea of, let's say, the Copilot landscape for Microsoft and what kind of products you can engage today. But that brings me into our focus, which is going to be Copilot in Viva, right? So how are we giving you that ability to use natural language to ask questions right within your applications like, hey, how can I analyze this information a little bit better? And the information is already there, right? It's in the app, and I'm able to start engaging with it and basically talking to these tools like a person. And so that's our goal today, is to get into what that's going to mean for you with a focus around a few Viva areas in particular. So let me jump into where we're starting, right? So to set the stage a little bit, now that we've kind of already gone through and talked a little bit about Copilot, when it comes to Viva, we've got, like I said, it's an employee experience platform, right? We've got a number of modules across these, across this platform or suite of tools. And so to break this down, we essentially like to talk about them in terms of these three pillars, right? Again, an employee experience platform, what it does is really put your employees at the center, right? And I think a lot of the folks who are attending today probably have a good baseline around what Viva is, right? And you want to see how is Copilot engaging in those. So what we'll be aligned with today is going to be looking at particularly around employee communications and connections, right? So we want to help drive better communication laterally and also from the top down for your organization. And how are we using these AI tools across these applications to make this happen? So Viva Engage going to be that that way to give you that more forums-based or community-based communication. Amplify, enabling those teams internally, those comms teams, to really have an effective way to campaign and have consistent ways to share information to your organization across the multiple channels that exist today, right? And I think that's what you'll take away during James' part of the session. And then Viva Connections, of course, still being an important piece, a little less of a highlight today, but of course, really significant in terms of how you're bringing all of this content into, let's say, one place to have that intranet experience, right? So sort of that landing zone for Viva and, of course, all the rest of your employees to start and kick off from. But that brings me into now how, excuse me, now how is Copilot now going to be influencing that? So, oh, excuse me, I have a tickle. Okay. Now, essentially, Copilot and Viva are going to be best friends moving forward. I think that's going to be the case for most of our applications and services, and you know, it's already the case with the Office suite, right? With Copilot for Microsoft 365, but Copilot and Viva is taking that again a little bit further, a little bit differently, right? We're angling that towards doing things like taking the power of things like content summaries, right? Where we're already doing that a bit today, summarizing emails and information, but now we're bringing that into spaces like Viva Engage, right? Where I've got loads and loads of people who are communicating across much larger forms or channels of communication. And now I can essentially summarize key conversations, you know, or use Copilot to identify where those conversations that I need to sort of chime in on or discover are taking place, but also in the building of things, right? So we'll see later on in sessions and in the next few days, we'll see things like Copilot being there to help you analyze, you know, engagement or collaboration analytics, you know, going a little bit deeper in terms of building out, you know, OKRs and goals for yourselves, right? So Copilot's going to have a big piece to play here. And we're doing this across how can you effectively roll it out? How can you effectively announce Copilot to your employees and, you know, be provided the tools across things like our adoption site. And then, of course, the Copilot dashboard is really going to engage effectively with Viva Insights as well to enable you to actually see how your adoption is going. You know, what's the success? How are people actually engaging with Copilot across your different applications and services within the Microsoft 365 cloud? But I will pause there. Any thoughts that James, Richard, you want to add to that? I know I was trying to cover a lot in that quick section.
No, I think it makes sense. We'll have a little bit of teaser again. We'll have a bit of an example at the end of how to use Engage and Amplify to accelerate your own Copilot journeys if you're looking at deploying Copilot for Microsoft 365 or the quote unquote free or lighter one of Copilot with formerly Bing Enterprise Chat. So I think that a lot of these things we'll address a little bit later as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, guys. So really when it comes to connecting with our employees and using the Viva Suite, when we look at our communications and our communities within Viva, we get a lot of features that come with our basic Microsoft 365 licenses. So, within Viva Engage, we have, our communities, conversations, we have storylines where we can post things and have people interact and kind of talk to each other across the organization. You also have, Viva connections built in, like Jamie mentioned, and a few advanced security and compliance settings as well. But then when you go beyond that and we look at our actual communications and communities SKUs, so we have a smaller add-on that's just for communication and communities, and then we also have the entire Viva suite as well, which kind of gets you everything. But you really start getting into more of the advanced features when it comes to employee communications. So we can include things in Viva Engage like Leadership Corner, where you can go in and have like people actually interact with the leaders in an organization. You can set up AMAs. You have more advanced analytics and even things like Viva Answers, where you can kind of source community answers for questions that people are asking across the organization. And you also get an entirely new platform called Viva Amplify, which Richard kind of mentioned earlier, where this is about you can send employee communications across the board and really target areas where your employees are interacting with data. And this goes across, SharePoint, Outlook, kind of all the features. And we'll definitely get into that a little bit later on in the session. And then, when you have the advanced SKUs, you also get Copilot starting to show up in across your Viva platform. So you can see here that you'll get Copilot kind of across most of the Viva modules. So if you have Copilot in Viva Goals, it really helps you generate your goals and recommendations from existing strategy documents and kind of refining suggestions with conversational AI. And it really helps you kind of publish progress summaries based on more contextual data. In Copilot in Viva Engage, it can help you provide insightful conversation starters. So based on sentiments and trending topics across the workplace communities. And it also gives suggested comment responses for leaders if they're trying to help answer questions or engage with their employees more. And in Viva Learning, Copilot can really help you easily create structured learning collections and find the right learning resources, as well as summarize content. So if you're struggling to find content or, where should I go to find this in Viva Learning, you can easily just ask Copilot and it'll source up the content for you that then you can just click into and start your learning progress. And then finally, Copilot in Viva Glint really highlights trends from community or from comments in kind of a robust way to quickly zero in on top issues to give leaders the context they need to effectively take action. And then the last one is in Viva Insights. Copilot really enables leaders to use natural language prompts to generate personalized and more dynamic reports that answer questions about their teams and their organizations. And so later on in the week, we're going to get into all of these so you guys can really get an understanding of how Copilot can help in each of these areas.
And just before you move on, can you just move back one slide? I want to chime in one
absolutely.
thing. So one of the things that we're learning right now, and it's been pretty exciting, is, Engage is a workload every employee often has access to. It's kind of seeded value in especially large organizations. It's a really common way people communicate and connect. And one of the things we've found is, well, Copilot for Microsoft 365 is incredibly powerful. It does have, a price point of $30 per user per US per month. And so if we look at something like the CNC license and what you're seeing here, you can get Copilot to improve communications for all employees in Viva Engage with the premium capabilities for a really small fraction of that, right? I think list price is something around $2 per user per month on US dollars. So, there's some really interesting opportunities here. And that's why we're kind of leading with some of the licensing. So you guys understand that there's a lot of, latent potential or even things you own now that you might be able to use a little bit better.
Awesome. Great points, Richard. Thank you. And then really what we're trying to do is we want to really drive home that AI is changing things more rapidly than we've seen anything do in a long time, especially in the workplace. And so if we really start embracing these tools, especially the ones that are built into our daily workflow, our day-to-day jobs and our organizations as a whole can really start benefiting and working faster and utilizing these tools. So I think we're in a really exciting time when it comes to AI in the workplace.
All right, awesome. Sorry. A little bit of a switchover issue.
All good. And so now we'll pivot to talking about communications with AI and Copilot. And I know one of the big things here is to understand how it's affecting different areas of communication. So we thought we'd take a high-level picture of this and talk about how it's affecting different areas of communication, and in particular, what starting with a free version of Copilot can do for a lot of organizations, because I think people underestimate its impact. So we'll go through some of this. We won't be able to go through all of it today just for the sake of time, but if you're interested in digging more into these details, definitely reach out. Let's talk about how it accelerates and optimizes communication, right? Using AI in communication, there's quite a bit we can do. First, I want to talk about what we're seeing in the industry. So if you look at Harvard and MIT and a number of different studies, we are seeing early, evidence-based discovery of productivity benefits in business context on how people are using ChatGPT 3.5, 4.0, and of course, Copilot itself. And some of those insights are quite interesting. Again, on average, we're seeing something around 60% productivity gain with what we'd consider GPT-4 or the equivalent of Copilot, not Copilot for Microsoft 365. So you get even more benefits when you use these technologies because you're compounding additional skills, capabilities, context. Grounding is the term Microsoft uses, but it has a lot more capability. So it drives that from a 60% productivity gain to, again, based on our own experiences with the customers, around 120% productivity gain. So there's a big real number here around immediate impact. Like people are starting to use it in those first months as they're learning it, and they're still driving those kinds of productivity gain benefits. In addition to that, we see quality increases. And quality of a work product like a business document is a big deal because it could lead to more sales wins or it could lead to other downstream impacts. So, having both more productivity and higher quality by such a significant margin is why everyone's excited and interested in these technologies. And so I thought that would be a good, bit of academic high level before we kind of pivot into, well, what could you do with some of these tools? And with that, I'll pass it to you, Jamie, for this slide.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was too eager. I jumped to this ahead of time and skipped your whole section, so I had some trouble there. But yeah, I think talking a bit about the different Copilot options that you have today is really going to help to start getting your end users engaged ahead of time. I really love to talk about, so you've got Copilot on the sort of left side there, which is going to be that Copilot, what we used to call Bing Chat Enterprise, right? So Copilot right in your browser experience, or if any of you have interacted with things like Windows Copilot, you'll notice that you've got that generative AI engine that you're now able to talk to and start to leverage today for everyone out there, right? So I really like to call that my place to, probably sounds bad, but I blow things up in there, right? I think a lot of folks tend to get a little bit concerned with generative AI tools that they're now using because they know that things like, hey, my question's going to train a model and I'm a little bit freaked out, or I'm nervous, or I don't, is that going to get tracked back to me? And so knowing that there's a tool there that you can start to leverage and it's secure and protected, and I'll go through and show you a little bit of that. Secure and protected, but also, really powerful, right? You're not losing in terms of the ability to tap into the power of that generative AI. Now you also have on the right-hand side the Copilot for Microsoft 365. That's where Copilot isn't just tapping into web content like it is with the other Copilot. Copilot for Microsoft 365 is tapping into all of your internal data, right? So of course, adhering to your internal security boundaries and rules and policies of things like SharePoint and OneDrive access. But in terms of, generative AI making this easier because it's able to tap into that data, because it has that web of connectivity between all my information and the people I collaborate with. I'm able to ask effective questions and like surface things like, hey, find me this document in SharePoint and analyze it for me to give an executive summary, right? But it's able to do so because it's got that connection. But I really love to highlight how you can take that further with Copilot in your browser. So we jump over here. You'll notice some of you may be licensed for Copilot for Microsoft 365 today because, of course, it is generally available, right? Something that you can purchase. But you'll notice when we start looking at Copilot just in your browser, I'll call it Copilot in Bing to make it easier for us. But in the top left corner of this chat window, you'll see that there's a little toggle here. And let me use this laser pointer for a little bit of help. So we can see work and web, right? When you've got Copilot for Microsoft 365, you'll notice this as a way to either choose to ask your prompts and tap into all of that internally connected data, or if you want to just source responses from the web. And this can be really effective for things like research, right? If I want to ask a question about an organization that I'm not yet engaged with, or a topic that's new to me and that I'm developing information for internally, I don't have that information internally yet, right? I need to source it outwardly. And so the great thing that Copilot in Bing can give you is that ability to, number one, have that seamless switch between when you are leveraging both tools, but also give you this protected way to engage with generative AI. So I just want to jump over to this slide and actually have the talk track here, because I really love to highlight in the top right corner, you'll notice it says protected. Having this tool enables me to feel confident whether or not I'm asking a silly question or copying and pasting sensitive or confidential information into that prompt chat, into that prompt space at the bottom. I know that my conversation with it at all times is protected. Not even Microsoft is monitoring it. So nothing about the engagement with this Copilot is being monitored whatsoever. So my prompts aren't going to train a model. Not even my organization is getting any access to that. In fact, it's really only usage metrics that we can see in terms of who is going to the actual URL or that engine, but we cannot see anything about that experience. So why is it powerful? What does it do? I would say that in terms of personally speaking, I absolutely have seen an uptick in my ability to find information faster and more effectively. So I was hired for my job because I'm not only technical, but I am really good at learning really fast, being able to find information effectively and regurgitate it to others. Right? It's kind of a summary of what I do. And Copilot in Bing has really assisted me in being able to do that, because a lot of the vetting work that it takes to go in and search for information is sort of being done for me. You'll notice that as this conversation has happened in this generative AI chat, I'm asking a question like I would a peer, right? Like I would a person. Hey, find me this information, or asking it maybe in a certain format to, create a table of all of the I use catering examples often. I say, create a table of all the catering companies in my local area, and only look for 4.5 stars and above ratings, and add a column in that table with a link to their contact information and their average cost. This does that, right? So I have that power at my fingertips. But the thing that makes it special is our promise to always make sure that we are trying to validate that information as much as possible, right? So we do something called grounding. So it's going to enable you to make sure that as it's providing you these search results, you as the human intermediary are always there to make sure that the responses that it gives you are coming from sources that you trust, right? And so that's the other power of it. So whether I'm engaging with it to create new content, like, hey, create a draft email for me and start to play with it, or just research to find information faster, it's all in this protected and accessible format. All right, and that brings me into Richard's section.
Yeah,
because I could go on and on, but I won't.
So let's summarize, right? We saw sort of a free-ish version of Copilot that every enterprise organization can roll out. It's pretty safely. It's commercial data protection, which means when you click that new button or you close the window, it's gone forever. There's no history of that. It's web grounded. If you choose to make it web grounded, of course, you have agency as a user, so you can web ground it. But it's not necessarily using your full organizational assets, the context, the thing called the Microsoft Graph, and the way you work. That's what you pay an additional fee for to have access. That's called Copilot for Microsoft 365. So let's talk about those scenarios. Again, lots you can do with that core capability. 60% productivity gain, 20% quality gain. Those average stats based on multiple, Harvard, MIT, other studies. That's what you're getting with this free version. Now let's talk about what you can take a little bit further. And this will be really the only digression, I think, in the whole session where we talk about M365, specifically Copilot. So the first one I wanted to do is, I really like this demo. It's a bit old. It's one of my favorite ones, where what you do is you take a meeting, some meeting notes that you had recently, grab a product roadmap and say, create a proposal for me. What it's then going to do is it's going to draft that proposal document. It then gives you the ability to take that proposal document, which is initially drafted, and optimize it. Perhaps I want to do things like grab some great existing proposal and its formatting and design and apply it to this, as well as some images from a product spec sheet. And so in this simple analogy of 1, 2, 3, 4 steps that we've done, we've actually gotten to a really early and pretty effective draft state. And there's a lot under the hood that's happening here, right? Initially, it's going to repeat itself. Initially, what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, grab these recent files for myself. It understands contextually what's relevant. So as I'm typing, remember, it understands the context. What are the recent meetings I've had? Here's the recent meeting notes. And then I'm able to quickly find that stuff. So that alone is really useful. Number two, I don't have to create multiple prompts because this is really actually quite a few prompts. What I'm doing is I'm saying, create a proposal for me based on those two documents. Well, those two documents that I used in the beginning weren't a proposal. Neither of them were a proposal. So what it's using is it's using the LLM model of something like OpenAI's capabilities to map out what is a proposal typically formatted like, what's the structure of that, and then to reconcile the language in each of those documents, my notes and this, and then kind of insert the content in the right spots so that it's correlated and it actually reads effectively. All of that is happening. So that's actually many prompts, if you think of a traditional prompting engine, that are happening out to this LLM and then back. And each time those prompts go out and come back, they're grounded in Microsoft 365 experiences and data. This goes back to my first point that I made at the very beginning. It gives us access to skills. Some of you are amazing at Word, and maybe you're really good at building beautiful proposals, but many of us don't have the understanding of those thousands of commands in Word to make things formatted. Now I have the ability to do that. Or another example here, many of us may not have the capabilities to understand how to merge these things effectively. We can use AI to speed those processes along. This brings us to a relatively simple visual that shows that when we use AI, we're actually starting further down the value chain where we're focusing on refining content versus initially creating it. Now, you might say, we have templates for this and reference documents, but trust me, in real world, people really struggle to reuse assets and they really struggle to reuse templates. Templates are often not up to date. They're not contextualized. What you're basically doing with AI is you're getting dynamic, always up to date, and contextualized, hyper contextualized templates. So that's a really powerful thing. And that's why you see those productivity gains of, like I said, 60 to 20%, 60% productivity, 20% quality on average. When you use something like Copilot on top of that, because it understands all those commands in PowerPoint and all those commands in Word, and it understands like who you work with and the files and the resources and the context, because it has that grounded data, it increases that to a much higher percentage for productivity and quality. And this gives us more time back to optimize things. Let's use it a different way. Another big part of AI is it's multimodal, right? We've seen, if you've seen Sora or some of the other big announcements, which by the way, Sora is coming, which I can publicly state because there was a tweet. So at least I'm acknowledging that it's already out there, that it's coming to the Copilot experiences at some point in the future. So if you've been really excited by all these innovations, they're coming as well. And what I mean by multimodal is you take a piece of content that's, in this example, let's say we have something in a PowerPoint and we want to convert it into a set of web pages. I'm not just talking about text to video or text to images or images to text, right? Doing alt tags for a bunch of images, which is another really common use case for communicators. You can do all those things, but what's really exciting is when you take something as simple as like an employee handbook or, for sales, or this example here where we have a new employee onboarding PowerPoint presentation, and we can literally use Copilot using SharePoint to convert that into a set of pages that are connected in a SharePoint site with web parts and everything configured. So it's a really big win because it means that a lot of people, maybe you have great Word, maybe lots of people in your org are good with Word, but how many people are good with SharePoint? How many people can take the time to create pages? Why is that useful? Let's take that sales handbook. If I wanted to know, which sections of that handbook are used by most people in my sales team, I can't do that with a single document, right? I just have usage data around that document. But if I convert it into pages, now I can see which pages are more often referenced by people. In fact, I could even look at, interesting attributes like department and see who outside of sales and what areas of the sales handbook are they using the most. And that might help me improve that content. So this narrative where we go from anything to anything, and we could go into video, all sorts of scenarios here, is a really, really important other subtext that's happening that increases the value of Copilot for Microsoft 365. So, the takeaway here is there's a lot of capabilities that we can now do with Microsoft tools, including the free versions, as well as these sort of paid Copilot for Microsoft 365 capabilities. But this brings us to the question on Viva. How does Viva play into this journey? So one of the big challenges we've all had is how do we communicate in today's modern ecosystem where we have to use multi-channel and we have to bring the intranet to users where they are in the context of their work. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to stop thinking about just the internet as a publishing space, but to think about our multi-channels, whatever they are in your organization. Here, I'm suggesting maybe your channels are things like Teams or engagement platforms like Viva Engage, community spaces. Maybe it's email, right? And how do we effectively engage there? Or maybe, again, thinking about learning as a way of communicating is actually a really important concept. Can we make it so that there's actually learning that's more about helping people align with key messages and understanding in the organization versus the traditional LMS, on compliance training? Or again, in concepts like organizational on concepts of aggregation, there's a lot of opportunity there now with Copilot as we look forward. So lots to discuss here. With that, let's dive into a demo, which I'll transition now to the team.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to start by going through essentially Viva Engage. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of what it's bringing you and also how Copilot is now integrated into the experience. So, what you're seeing in front of you is a couple of things that I love about Viva Engage. Now, it's, as you know, a lot of folks here potentially have used it. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Yammer before in the past, but it's really taken a huge turn and become something completely, I don't want to say completely different, but has absolutely transformed, sort of meet the modern day, I suppose, and the modern user. And as a communication tool, I think the thing I've really loved about Viva Engage and what you're seeing now in front of you is things like the leadership corner, right? So basically Microsoft taking in a lot of the research, a lot of the feedback that we've received about how people are engaging with their organization, right? Like what's successful, what are some of the gaps and missing areas? And I think things like knowing who your leadership is or knowing how they feel and think about your organization, is that aligned? Do you feel like you have a voice in the space of your organization, or that you know how to tap into the thought process, right? Like, do you really understand what is being asked of you as an employee, and what's the vision? And so creating a platform to accomplish that was something really important to us. And by creating things like your leadership corner, which you see in front of you. So at the top of Engage, you've got these various tabs, right? Home, communities, things we're familiar with, but things like leaders. So I can actually know that, hey, there's always going to be a place for me to go to ask questions. I know where I can come in and, let's say, access an AMA, right? So, and ask me anything, right? I think I've had various roles in Microsoft over the years, spanning from retail to tech support to pre-sales position, and throughout all of that, I've obviously had many shifts in my own leadership alignment. But knowing that I always had somewhere to go, so as soon as Engage started to have this, I'm able to go in and start actually asking direct questions, or if my leaders are making posts, or if we do have an Ask Me Anything, and I have a really challenging question that I want visibility on, right? I want others to also be able to say, yeah, I actually want to upvote that. I want to get some thumbs up. I want to drive some visibility because we all agree. And it's creating this really fantastic space to connect, not only with those who I may otherwise not have any touch with, right? Microsoft has a couple 100,000 employees, and our orgs are large as well as we break down. So being able to have a space for that dedicated, where everyone knows where to go, at the top, in the middle, at the bottom, wherever, that we're all kind of coming together. But that takes me a little bit into, what we're seeing in terms of, Copilot in Viva. I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit for time's sake. So one of the key areas that you see, so you saw a couple images there of leadership corner, right? So in that corner, I would see things like a list of my typical leaders. I would get to see how that breaks down for my organization, and also who the all up leadership is. I would also see in that AMA space other question and answers that were happening that I can engage with. So you get sort of an image of that here. But what you see in answers in Viva is something a little different. That's where we start to take the turn with AI and generative AI. So answers in Viva is essentially a conversational experience where people can come together and identify where key conversations are already taking place, and being able to actually get assistance in identifying who can effectively answer my questions and use natural language processing to do so, right? So essentially, to break it down again for time's sake, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Essentially, some key functionality is coming to your experience when I start to use answers in Viva. One of the key pieces that Copilot and Viva are bringing together is the ability to help me ask questions in an effective way to get the best answers, right? So I think a lot of us know the experience of hey, I've hit a roadblock. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to ask this question of, and I don't know how to find the right answer. But, in Engage, I might be able to sort of broadcast my question. But let's take that further with Answers. What Answers is going to do is start to actually assist me in being able to build effective questions. So you start to type out your question, as you can see sort of in this image, right? What are the best practices for applying these customer credits? But you'll notice to the right-hand side, I'm starting to get Copilot recommending some things. It's saying, hey, because it's understanding of natural language, because it knows the difference between, the nuances between what you're saying and as people write, it understands that, it's able to interpret. And in real time, it's saying, hey, I can see what you kind of are looking for here. Here are some better ways to maybe frame that, or here's some ways to add value to your question or add some context to your question in order to probably get better answers or find the right audience, right? And so you'll see on the right-hand side, it's giving you some of those suggestions, things I can simply click and insert, or even just, maybe glance at and start to modify on my own. So some fantastic input there. Then we also see its ability to identify existing answers. So one thing that I've really loved Answers for personally is, I mentioned I've used Engage for a long time, been at Microsoft a long time, huge company. These are our sort of three areas, right? The part that has been really great for me was initially the only thing that I had access to in Answers before I had the ability to have it assist me in coaching my question asking, was my ability to identify existing conversations effectively. So I would go into Answers and I would think, I need to ask something, but again, I don't know where to ask. Or the better question is, has someone already had this conversation? Has someone already asked this question effectively and identified the right answer and the right people? And so I'll go to Answers and I'll start to type in my question. And it's starting to already identify, and you'll notice these sort of two images stacked here. At the top, you'll start to see they have that blank question space. And at the bottom image there, you'll start to see it's identified things that say things like best answers. So based on my question, it's already looking through all of this environment to say, hey, have these conversations already taken place? Have we already vetted out that there is someone who contributes to this conversation a lot and has sort of been able to be identified as having the best response? Because that's one of the elements of Answers is it's a little bit gamified as well, right? Because as I continue to answer questions myself in Viva and in Engage and in Answers, Answers is actually picking that up and starting to say, hey, you contribute a lot. And I essentially start to build a bit of recognition. So when I'm giving those responses, it's identifying those best answers here as well for me. So taking a little bit of that vetting process out of my hands. Or off my hands, I should say. Now, other things that it's going to do is also the automation of finding the right people to talk to. So not only am I asking questions using AI, reaching out in a more effective way. This I absolutely love. This has actually started to kick in my own environment where Engage is finding me. All right, Answers is finding me. It's saying, hey, a recent question came up in Engage. Do you want to contribute to this? Right. And it can essentially identify that I might have relevant input. And so it brings me right to that effective post. And not only that, but now you actually see that now that post has been identified, it's even suggesting a potential response. So let's walk through what you're seeing on the page. In the top left corner, you'll notice it says, in that activity feed, that first item there, it's a little small for me. Can we help you answer this question? Or can you help answer this question? We see the question here, it drives me right into that space. And then on the far right, you'll also see Copilot is even saying, hey, here's a potential response. We've taken a little bit of a look. It of course has access to what you have access to in the environment, and also all this other various information of information sharing we've done, right? So our comments, thoughts, and feedback to one another is also information. So it's able to give you a potential response to this comment. Now, taking things a little bit further, now we've seen sort of how Copilot is helping to identify key people, answers, and conversations, bring it to the forefront effectively and in an automatic sort of way, right? So identifying those key people that are going to help be the right resources and contributors, and then of course assisting in their effective and sort of quick, proficient response. But we go a little bit further as well. We start to see that here you can actually watch that coaching happen. So we're seeing I'm starting to type in my question, but it's also giving me things like, what about when I want to start creating a storyline, right? So another element of Viva Engage is my ability to have people follow me, have me share things that are important or significant to me, whether that's something about the job and what I contribute to the team, or something about how I want to contribute culturally in the team. Whatever it is that I want to share, I have this space in a storyline to be able to do so. Think of it as your personal social media feed. We're kind of doing that same thing here right within Viva Engage for individuals, right? And so what Copilot is doing is coming into that space where I'm starting to build my post. Maybe leaders are starting to build a post out to their team, right? Or your comms team is building something, or me personally, like I said, maybe I'm a subject matter expert about something internally, or I lead a sort of, part of our culture team internally. Like I said, I've got something that I want to share amongst other people, and Copilot is starting to assist me in building out my post, right? And so giving me ideas initially. So starting even from blank, it's starting to say, hey, maybe I don't know what I want to say. Maybe this is my first time posting and Engage. And Copilot is already saying, hey, here's some things you can start to talk about. And I maybe could take that further and do things like start to source additional content for my post, right? So if I've got an existing summary or briefing or a document or PowerPoint that I've already worked on, and I want to say, hey, transform this, make it easy for me. I don't know how to summarize all this into a few keywords. Do this on my behalf. Copilot is going to help you accomplish that. Now that we've understood like how to actually engage, right? How Copilot is helping you from interpreting information, finding key resources, and even building out your own communication. What does that look like in terms of how you can analyze what people are seeing? And so our analytics, just at a high level, we see things like my personal analytics, how people are engaging with my posts, right? So what's the sentiment? What are the amount of people engaging? What kind of visibility am I getting? But this also comes across in your audience analytics across the board for posts that you're providing, and even campaigns that you are doing, right? So larger scale communications you're sending out through Engage. Now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just for, again, the sake of time, and I want James to be able to go through some of the Amplify piece as well. In something like Viva Connections, I just want to bring it back to this page really briefly, because while we're not spending a ton of time here today, it is really key and important to understand how it is giving you, again, that landing space, that page sort of source everything to give everybody a place to jump out from in terms of all the other Viva modules and really other important pieces of your organization, right? So things like being able to integrate a Viva Engage community conversation right into Viva Connections, or also have things like your all of you'll notice here on the page at the bottom of this connection page gives you an idea of how you can bounce out to my other Viva modules from this space as well. Now, just to just go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, maybe I'll just do this as we transition it to James. That'd be perfect. So, here what we see is we have, the leadership corner. And I just wanted to highlight one other common thing that comes up a lot is this idea of following. So in those leadership corners and just storylines and these other concepts, you have this message space where leaders can publish, but you might worry, well, if it's just happening in Viva Engage, is that going to show up in the places that matter to me in the organization? And so one of the key features that you have is this ability to set up who is following people. And you can actually configure this for leaders, lowercase l leaders, influencers, or capital L leaders. And then you can actually have them publish. And when you publish as a leader, you can override people's personalization settings if you want to. Great power comes great responsibility. But most importantly, you'll see that information show up in your intranet via the Viva Connections feed, as well as your Viva Engage web parts. You'll see it show up in Teams as activities, and there's actually quite a few ways it shows up there. You saw some examples with questions. You'll see it show up in email. And if you haven't used Viva Engage with email, it's fully fidelity. So you can you can reply, you can actually live and breathe in email. In fact, those initial messages that you publish as a leader can actually happen from email. They don't need to go to the Viva Engage app or the Viva Engage experience. So those things are really powerful, and it gets us closer to that, thinking about that multi-channel strategy, which is, of course, where Amplify has some big impact. And with that, maybe James, you could walk us through a bit of Viva Amplify and how that's also changing how we communicate in this post-AI era.
Yeah, absolutely. So Viva Amplify is really it's kind of a powerful tool that helps organizations create and execute coordinated campaigns that can align with specific objectives, right? So you can do things like promote a new initiative or drive employee participation, and it uses various communication channels. So you can send out communications across SharePoint, Outlook, Teams to reach employees wherever they are to deliver those targeted messages. It also integrates with Viva Engage. Really enables people to be interactive and give feedback among the employees, and it really fosters that culture of engagement and collaboration. While we don't have Copilot in Viva Amplify yet, I just wanted to run through quickly kind of what Viva Amplify looks like and how you can use it, just to give you an idea. So you can see when you start with Viva Amplify, you can create new campaigns, or you can easily just jump into campaigns that you've already started to publish more content, and then easily get quick information on number of views, number of shares, and whether the campaign is currently live or not. So you can see here, when we start to build out a campaign, you're taken to a page where you can start writing up your message, right? So you can, right now we're writing about the empowering Relic Cloud's future, but we can put in our content, put in images, all of that kind of stuff. But the nice thing I wanted to highlight is on the right-hand side, where you can go through and check or uncheck the different sources where you want to be able to share this information or this message or this campaign. So you can see you have Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, and Engage as well. And so it really gives you that ability to be able to focus and share content wherever your employees are consuming it the most, right? So we'll click through here, and what I wanted to highlight is that when we've created our content, right? So we have our page ready to go, and we can go ahead and click next to publish that content. So before we actually publish it, we can actually preview the communication across all of our different platforms where we're going to send it out. So Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, Engage, we can go through and actually look at what that content is going to look like. So right now you can see that we're previewing it, what the newsletter looks like in Outlook. But then when we click on SharePoint, we can see what it's going to look like in a SharePoint site. And I really wanted to call out that you can see at the top, it says this content will be formatted to match the style and theme of the site that it's published to. So you can publish this to multiple SharePoint sites and not have to worry about changing the format or updating what it's going to look like for each site. That's going to be automatically taken care of for you. So I think it's a really, really nice feature that just takes some of that design stuff off of your plate and lets you focus more on the content that you're going to be sending out. And then again, we go through Teams and Viva Engage as well, where you can look and see what these different content sources are going to look like. So if everything looks good, what we can do is go ahead and publish our content. And so you can see that when we click on publish, we're actually going to get a few different options where we can publish it immediately. We can choose a day and time to schedule to say if we're not starting the campaign until next week. Or if you have a marketing team or leadership that wants to approve these communications before they're going out, we can request approval as well. And so once we do that, we see we get kind of a nice highlight of what the campaign is going to be. We can see where it's going to go out, what the subject is, and all of that kind of stuff. And it even breaks it down by specific SharePoint sites as well. So when we move forward, we can then add our approvers, send them a message, let them know what's going on, and then we can go ahead and click next to send that approval out. And so once that approval goes out, we can actually choose to schedule that publication. So once it's been approved, we can pick a specific date and time to schedule that publication, which is really nice. We can also just get a notification that it's been approved, so we can go ahead and manually publish the content. Or we can just choose to automatically publish the content once it's been approved. So you have quite a few different options on how you want to publish the content once it has been approved by the leadership team or the marketing team. So that's kind of how you can use Viva Amplify to get the message out across the organization. But once that message is out there, what I really want to highlight now is the reporting aspects in Viva Amplify. So you can really get a good understanding of how people are viewing and interacting with your content. So go next here and jump into the reporting. There we go. And so you can see here that, once you click on reporting for a specific campaign, you can jump in and automatically in your dashboard, you get awesome insights into the number of viewers and number of promotions that are going through. And it even breaks it down by each distribution point as well. So you can look and say, hey, maybe, Viva Engage isn't getting as many interactions as we'd like. So maybe, but we can see a lot of people are liking the message or sharing the message via Outlook. So maybe next time we can focus more on the Outlook message rather than Engage. And so it really gives you the opportunity to kind of tailor your message depending on where your employees are consuming or interacting with information the most. And then if we keep going on, we can see that when we scroll down, we can actually get detailed views on all of our publications within a specific campaign. And it breaks it down even further when you can look at not only the views and promotions, but comments and reactions as well. So you can see positive, negative comments, the types of reactions that you're getting on the content, as well as just the number of likes in the content as well. And you can see that more when we jump into this next page here, where it kind of breaks it down even further to not only just by the type of distribution channel, but you can actually see the interactions for each different SharePoint site or each Teams channel or each Engage community as well. So you really do get a lot of insights into the reporting. And finally, the last thing to highlight is that when you dive in even deeper, let's say into a specific SharePoint site, you get these super deep analytics too. So you can get the actual number of page viewers, page views, the average time spent per user on the page. And one of the coolest things I think is down here at the bottom right-hand side here, where you can see the page traffic by time. So it'll actually suggest to you the best time to publish a news post to a specific SharePoint site based on when the most people are on the site and interacting with it. So you can see through Viva Amplify, it's a great way to be able to publish content across your organization and also be able to get deep analytics so that as you're moving forward, you know the best places, the best times, the best spots to send out these communications so that your employees are getting the most out of them. And with that, I will hand it back over to Richard.
So this is actually perfect because there's two things that AI basically is analytics and automation. And you saw, especially near the end there, what we have is we have richer analytics, right, that are made available to us. And those analytics can provide more opportunities for automation. And those things will continue to evolve. You'll see more future updates in Viva Amplify and how it uses Copilot. But for now, think about how you can use Copilot in our previous examples. So you can draft content for different audiences using Copilot. Again, just drafting it, not with Copilot for Office 365 even, just generic Copilot to help you draft really good messaging for different audiences. And then you can produce it and communicate it and even distribute it and manage it through something like Viva Amplify. So really, really powerful tool for organizations as they tackle communication. One last comment there, keep in mind, you can even generate images. So if you're trying to complement your material to make it a little bit more compelling, you can do that as well. So with that, we're going to dive into just a quick summary of this section, which was a lot. And the key is we want to start with our own personal productivity. If you take something like Engage, starting with your ability to create your own storylines and understand how you could potentially use Viva Copilot experiences is a good starting point. Like, how do I draft better messaging? I have lots of insights myself. Why don't I, as a lowercase or capital L leader, run an AMA and then see, how that creates and seeds great questions and answers, which will lead towards that answers in Viva experience that we all want. So those are things that we can all take personal and individual actions on, and then scale that to our team, our department, or our business unit. And this brings us to the question of how do we plan for the future? Now, for simplicity, I'm just going to highlight maybe 3 quick calls to action, just for the sake of time. And again, if you're interested in planning for the future, I really do recommend having a more focused 1-to-few session. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is that we need to think of this strategically. Employee experience has a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of areas to invest. Communications is a critical part of it. And so in this particular visual, I'm showing you one way to think about that employee experience, perhaps with an AI lens, lens on how you might improve it. And so thinking about those timelines and how those things reflect on each other is important. Don't do this alone. Use Microsoft, use partners like Tutor Lead and others to give you the insights you need to direct that. What's more, for many customers, there may be both funding programs from Microsoft as well as pathways you can explore around how other customers are doing this. So this is a particular, this is called CNC Communications and Communities, but it's basically a Viva Leaders Engage and Amplify pilot that happens over around a 9-week period that drives success within these two workloads. So there's really proven models that we have with work breakdowns and data and details on how to execute this well. And for many of the customers that are larger, there's real funding from Microsoft available right now, at least before the end of the fiscal, that you can take advantage of. So I really do encourage you to think about your own pilot strategy. And if you can do this in-house, by all means do it, but many customers benefit from having some external expertise, especially in understanding some of these patterns. Of course, this also brings up the question of how could we potentially use this not just to improve communications and engagement, but to actually help with our AI transformation. Just like we had the pandemic and everyone was a digital first responder and had to adapt to that, now we have this very real, very emergent need to exponentially change and transform our businesses with AI. And so, believe it or not, these same tools we've mentioned are critical in rolling out things like Copilot, either the free one or the Copilot for Microsoft 365 capability. And so we need to understand how to use these tools like the Viva ones we mentioned today, like Viva Engage, as well as and Amplify to run campaigns. So I have a few slides for reference. You can look at it after for reference, but there's a few different examples and materials you can use to help with designing effective campaigns and supporting your Copilot deployment. And of course, there's a lot of other lessons learned we can share, but these are some quick references for yourself. And lastly, that brings us to thinking about skills. There's a lot of changes to skills that are going through organizations. And with all this change, it can create a lot of tension and concern. So for simplicity, the biggest takeaway we would have is as much as things are changing, the intent around communications remains the same. What we want to do is we want to get that message to more people, and we want more people to understand it. We want more engagement around messaging, not because we're just trying to drive an artificial number, but because we know that drives greater alignment, that drives greater connection, and because employees that are more engaged are more likely to voice and share and contribute, and also ask those questions that are answers. So these are things that we want more of. The intent hasn't changed, just the ways in which we maximize and realize that intent.